All right, welcome to Halitics. So excited to be with you today. It's Monday. It's a new week. It's an Arlen Monday. Arlen, how are you today?
I'm fine, except when I look at the news, and I'm not so fine. You mentioned yesterday privately that the news is depressing, and I have to agree with you. When you look at everything that there is, whether this election or foreign policy, and with Israel and Gaza and all that, it's just nothing but bad news.
It really is, Arlen. It's so sad. But there was, we didn't discuss talking about this story at all. But, how do you feel about the economic news? We have seen the unemployment rate ticking down. There's a lot of questions people raise about how relevant the metrics are for working people. I don't really have a strong sense, but it seems to me that is good news, I guess, as far as it goes. Unemployment rate is relatively low. Any thoughts on that? Well, very low, actually.
Any good news like that is pretty much disregarded by Trump's voters. Every lie, every crazy thing he says doesn't seem to matter to his voters, nor, in fact, to any of the Republicans that are running for office. They're just totally all in for, extremism and its craziness. And
so you think they're just irrational? You don't think we've been through this many times, but I don't, isn't that an awfully self-righteous and arrogant attitude that you, Arlen, and the people who vote the way you do know best for everyone else, and that if they don't agree with you, they must be irrational nuts?
I think the proof is in things that Donald Trump says. He says crazier and crazier, impossible things, nothing to do with reality. He talks about Democrats trying to assassinate him. He talks about, Democrats doing all the worst possible things in the world, and nobody seems to care. It just doesn't hurt him in the polls.
To be fair, Arlen, and aren't Democrats doing some really awful things? I mean, putting aside what Trump says or doesn't say, Joe Biden and Anthony Blinken utterly ignored a report that Israel was preventing humanitarian aid from getting into Gaza. Isn't that pretty? I mean, I think there's a kind of a consensus that genocide is the worst crime in the world. And even William Kristof in the New York Times, which is all in for Harris-Biden, or Harris at this point, they acknowledge this is really, really bad what Biden's done. So, I mean, is it unfair to believe the worst about Joe Biden when he is an enabler, a facilitator of genocide?
Well, like one of the articles said, the country's pretty well split. So, Kamala Harris is in a tough position. If she decides she's, going all in with Biden and Netanyahu, that's dangerous. And if she breaks from them, that could be dangerous for for her too, as far as people supporting her. But the difference between, I think, the Democrats and Republicans right now is that Trump is completely off the wall. He's, he lies. He's not in reality. He doesn't tell the truth, doesn't know how to. And people just accept the crazy things that he says, which are really dangerous and maybe setting the country up for some violence later on after the election. If it's a close election, what's going to happen. So I just think where we disagree is on whether the Democrats are good faith actors, whether they're people we can rely on. Yes, Trump is very, very bad, but it's not clear to me at all that Harris-Biden or Harris-Walz are better. From Jordan News, I always center the plight of the Palestinian people at the hands of Israel and the United States. 49 more deaths in the last 24 hours. This is, of course, while Israel is also engaged in a war
basically, again, a turkey shoot in Lebanon using our weaponry to prevent people from leaving the country. And they're targeting and killing hundreds, I think it's probably now thousands of civilians. So I can't tell stories like that and then pivot to, but Trump is so much worse. Trump is so evil. I can't compartmentalize. This is the centerpiece of the Harris-Biden policy. I can't discuss this without, condemning them and saying, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that they're better than Trump. I understand you can. I don't really understand that, Arlen.
Well, I know, but I agree with you that the foreign policy right now that Netanyahu is doing, that Biden is going along with, it's terrible. I don't think there's any excuse for it. But at least, you could make a rational case for what's going on. And another thing that's bothering me right now is that Netanyahu's getting away with so much now. He's able to, Iran is not much of a powerful nation to, they can't seem to do anything to Israel. And, whenever they shoot their rockets over, they get knocked down. So Netanyahu's in a good position, and he's probably more popular now than ever because he's, getting some military successes, even though you're right, his humanitarian policies are horrible. You're right about that.
Well, and whose fault is that, right? Isn't this the complete failure of the Harris-Biden administration's policies with respect to Israel?
Well, one of those stories we were going to talk about is how Biden has just, totally got it wrong. I mean, he expected Netanyahu to cooperate with him if he was reasonable. If Biden was reasonable, he could talk Netanyahu into some kind of a peace deal, but we're not anywhere near a peace deal. I think the main reason being that Netanyahu doesn't want a two-state solution. He doesn't want the Palestinians to be in control of their own people. And unless he changes his mind, you're not going to get much from him. I'm hoping maybe Harris will think a little bit differently and maybe have a little more flexibility. At least I hope so.
Has she said or done anything, in your opinion, that leads you to believe she might be less bad than Biden on this issue?
Well, she's said a few things about, that they've gone too far, as far as humanitarian problems. And, she's mentioned that she doesn't like what Israel is doing to civilians, and, as any normal person would. But she's kind of, stuck in a position where she can't contradict Biden, or she can, but it would be politically difficult, let's put it that way. And she's got to show some support for Biden. At the same time, she's got to also come out with her own ideas. So I'm hoping, she'll say a few more things, but she has said some things that are pro-humanitarian, that are somewhat critical of Netanyahu.
And frankly, so has Biden. I mean, I don't know that there's much difference there. Biden has also criticized the Netanyahu regime on occasion. You're listening to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. We've got Arlen with us. It's an Arlen Monday. Arlen, this is where I was Saturday. This was a pro-Palestine rally just across the street from the White House. I just thought I'd share that. I do try to walk the walk, not just come on this live stream and babble, but actually try to do a few things that show my support for the policies that I believe in. Yeah, we were in, if anyone knows DC, that's right at the very end of 16th Street at Lafayette Park. When you take 16th Street northwest south into DC, it ends and then it starts up again. I mean, it doesn't completely end, but it stops at the Lafayette Park, which is directly across from the main entrance to the White House, where there's that rotunda with the columns in the front. So you don't see it in that image that I shared, but that's right by the White House. So no one came to speak, as far as I could tell. There are no representatives from the White House at this rally.
You can't get through the front door, huh? By just talking your way into it?
Well, we were in the street. I mean, this was a rally that had the approval, I guess, or they had received the permit they needed to do it. But that's going to be outside. It's not going to be. Have you been to D.C., Arlen? Maybe you're not quite familiar.
A long time ago. It was. Now I think it's even more restrictive than it was back then. But we haven't been there in like 20 years, something like that. So, I'd like to go back again soon.
It's actually a beautiful city. Really like Washington a lot. Lots of aspects to D.C. I like better than the city I knew much better in my earlier years, New York City. It's built on a human scale. There aren't huge skyscrapers. It's a great walking city. There's a lot of things I really like about Washington, to be perfectly honest. And the rallies are a positive aspect. Also, free museums, all the art museums, everything that's related to the Smithsonian is completely free. And that's a great, great perk of living in Washington. You mentioned the failures. Now, this is from, I guess, one of your favorite columnists. This is an article that Arlen wanted to discuss. Here it is. Biden sought peace but facilitated war. So let me get that headline. Just the headline. We're going to go through a lot of these stories. Obviously, Arlen, with you, anything by Kristof is at least you're going to look at, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I'm just, he's somebody that you've commented on as a top journalist and a top columnist. Was there anything in specific that jumped out at you? I've got a lot. I cut and pasted a lot in here, but I wanted your take first.
Well, I think that the worst thing about it, of course, is that Biden somehow expected Netanyahu to listen to him, when all the evidence prior to this is that Netanyahu is going to do whatever he wants to do. Netanyahu, like Trump, will get in a lot of legal trouble if Israel, loses the war or stops the war, and there's just all kinds of reasons for Netanyahu to get what he wants, and what he wants is total control and being able to militarily stop any of his so-called enemies. He doesn't want any part of Iran or Hezbollah and all that, and he's doing pretty good as far as keeping them under control. So, he's feeling pretty good, but it hurts Biden, I think, and by extension, it hurts Kamala Harris because she, has to kind of go along with whatever Biden says up to a point. But she's made a few examples of maybe things that she might differ on, and I hope she does more because she's not getting anywhere in the polls right now.
Well, she's probably leading the popular vote by a couple percentage points, given the vagaries of the Electoral College and the fact that Trump in general has outperformed polls in recent elections. Even in 2020, where he lost to Biden, he lost by a much narrower margin than was predicted. And he was down by about 6 points in the polls at this time 4 years ago, whereas he's now down about 2.3, I believe. So it doesn't look great for Harris, but, I'll be honest with you, I'd rather be, if all I cared about was winning the White House, and if I were Kamala Harris, I guess that's all I would care about. Same with Trump. I would rather be, I think, in Harris's shoes, in her stilettos, than in whatever, I guess, Trump's golf shoes. Do you blame, because I absolutely lay the fault and the thousands of deaths now in Lebanon, the humanitarian crisis that Israel has created by its invasion, I blame directly the Harris-Biden administration, because they're continuing unwavering, and using Kamala's words, support for Israel is what gave Netanyahu both the weaponry, but also the diplomatic support for this.
Well, you got to figure too you got to think about the Democratic Party in the last several decades. When Obama was president, they kept hoping that the Republicans would cooperate, so they would make deals with them. And it turned out the Republicans had no intention of agreeing with anything that Obama and Vice President Biden wanted. So it's just a common theme that they are just too, they're just too nice and too optimistic when they shouldn't be, when all the evidence points to the fact that the Republican Party is going to do what it wants to do. Netanyahu is going to do what he wants to do, and not much that Biden or Harris could say about it that would change anything.
Well, they're the most powerful people on the planet. I mean, they have lots of weapons at their disposal. Use that term. They just, for whatever reason, are providing all the weapons to Israel. To me, this is a clearly a war crime. I don't know any other way to look at it. I'll go through just a few of the quotes here, and if you have something else, I don't want to miss anything, Arlen, that you're interested in discussing, but Biden became this is Nick Kristof. Biden became the arms supplier for the leveling of Gaza, a war that killed more women and children in a single year than any other war in the last 2 decades. That makes it worse than Ukraine. That makes it worse than Ukraine. So I hate to keep drilling down this, but why doesn't that say to you, maybe we need to move to a different political party? The Democratic Party cannot be viewed as a vessel for change. So we have to do something different.
Yeah, the Democratic Party is wrong about this. They've made their mistakes. Netanyahu and Israel are doing these kind of war crimes that they probably should be held accountable for. But we're stuck with the alternative. But if you don't have Biden, or rather, if you don't have Kamala Harris, you're going to have Donald Trump, and who knows what he's going to do? Nobody really knows. And he could, make the war even, give Netanyahu more power to do more killing. So, it's a lot of unknowns here, but I think you could safely say that if Trump were president, that we would be in a lot more trouble, I think.
10,000 children killed, 2,000 with limbs amputated. 85% of Gazan children have gone without food for a full day. 85%. It's kind of hard to think it could be worse. I understand you want to, that's the argument, but I question that argument.
It's just, as bad as it is, and I agree with you, it's totally horrible. It is totally, inhumane, but again, we're stuck with a choice of who we're going to vote for. It's only less than a month now. And, Kamala, who knows, might do better than Biden. Maybe she'll, make some smart moves and realize that it's hurting our country and hurting a lot of civilians, and then maybe, move her policy a little bit different than Biden's. At least I hope so.
Well, I think you frame it as though it's a choice between Trump or Harris, whereas one could say none of the above. Likewise, as it appears, a majority, or at least a plurality of Muslims in swing states and purple states are actually choosing Jill Stein. So that is certainly another option. Seems as though one that you and so many others, not you, certainly not alone, but you and Nicholas Kristof don't even acknowledge exists. And yet there is another option, Arlen.
Well, none of the above, or Jill Stein, or any other third-party candidate might get some votes and might change even the course of the election, but none of them are going to be president of the United States on January 20th next year. It's going to be either Biden or it's going to be Trump. And I mean, not Biden, but Kamala Harris or Trump. And I'm certainly hoping it's going to be Harris.
See, I just don't, why, Nick Kristof has a tremendous reach. Admittedly, Hal and Arlen don't, but Nick Kristof does. Rachel Maddow does. Why aren't they making the case for Jill Stein? Why aren't the so-called progressives in media who have real influence, who can make a difference, why aren't they coming out and saying, we need to go in a different direction. And if we don't hear from Kamala Harris that she is going to forcibly break from the genocidal war crime Israel state, Jewish state, you can't vote for her. Why don't they do that?
Well, Kristof was very critical of Biden and that policy, and that's probably all he could do right now. I mean, he can't, make Biden or Harris do anything right now. But it's a tough situation for Harris. I hope she is smart and realizes that the best way to do things would be to get some peace in that area and have a two-state solution and get some of that killing to stop. But Jill Stein's not going to be there, and neither will any other third-party candidate.
Well, we're supposed to live in a democracy. That means to me the people decide for whom to vote. They decide who will be our leader. Now, I understand you shake your heads, and it's certainly not a democracy in this regard. The people that we do elect don't do what we want them to do. The people that we do elect do what the billionaire class want. The media does not present, all sides of an issue. They present issues in ways that redound to the benefits of the owners and top managers of the media corporations, who are rich and powerful people. So this is my question. We still get to decide who's our leaders. We don't have to follow the media. We don't have to just accept what James Carville tells us. So why are we?
Well, one thing that you're wrong. First of all, we agree it is not a democracy. We don't really get to decide who we want. The American people don't get what they want because, as we know, the power in our country goes to the people at the top, the ones who have the most money, the billionaires, the head of the major corporations. They have it all. We don't have a democracy. In fact, it's built into our Constitution that we don't have a democracy because you have that electoral college, which certainly doesn't reward the person with the most votes. And that's inexcusable. And no other country in the world has that kind of a voting system that we do. And I hope someday it'll change.
Yeah, but even okay, but we don't have to vote. You say, Nick Kristof says, I presume, although he doesn't say it specifically, you say, so many others say, not just you. I don't want to put you on the spot, but we don't legally. No one is in that ballot box pointing a gun in our head and saying you have to vote for either R or D. No one's saying that. So again, I keep coming back to, why don't we unite together and not vote for R or D?
Well, I hope the American people at some point will decide, hey, this system isn't working and, we're going to change it. But right now, those who go into the polls are influenced by right-wing networks like Fox News, that there's a lot of money involved in that. And people, make big bucks trying to scare the American people. When we go to the ballot box, we're also totally overwhelmed by the amount of money spent on ads and commercials and everything by these candidates, especially in the swing states. There's so much money involved that they have to be influenced by that kind of advertising. So this system is just so messed up, and I wish we could do what you say. Change everything.
Well, we can. We actually can. We could do it. It's the reason we're not is because so many people are saying we can't, but we actually could.
I don't know how, but
by voting for Jill Stein, by voting for Green Party candidates, by not voting for Democrats.
I don't think that you'll have enough people in this country that are willing to vote for a Green Party candidate.
Well, that's the problem, right? I mean, that's because people are afraid. They're, as you said, they're scared by Fox, but they're also scared by MSNBC. They're also scared by the New York Times. They hear over and over. But, I was talking to my wife yesterday, and she started going on about, she's done this before, Project 2025, or how oh gosh, what's his name? Mike Johnson refused to acknowledge that, that Trump did lose in 2020. And these are all issues that are designed to separate us, to pry us apart. But again, I agree. I don't have a lot of influence. You don't have a lot of influence, but people like Nick Kristof do. People like Rachel Maddow do. Why aren't they using that influence to demand that we vote for someone who actually will make things better? I will point out that it's not even as though in 2020, Biden did win the Democratic primaries, and he did beat Bernie. Now, I wasn't thrilled about it, but I'm not one of those people who say, oh, it was a conspiracy and Obama this and Obama. Look, Obama did stick his heavy paw right on the scale for Biden at the end. But the fact is, people didn't have to vote for Joe Biden, and they did. But people didn't vote for Kamala Harris to be the Democratic nominee. She just was anointed by the elitists. This is the opportunity of a lifetime to turn our back on the Democratic Party and punish it and hurt it, because the Democratic Party needs to lose, or this will never change, Arlen. It will only get worse.
I understand your passion, Hal, and it makes a lot of sense, but I just don't see the scenario you're talking about actually happening, because, if the Democratic Party loses, that just means the Republican Party wins. And that is far worse, in my opinion.
No, because at that point, hopefully, we keep making the case that we have to go to a different place than the Democratic Party.
Well, again, I'm totally with you, Hal. I just don't see how it's done. I don't see any easy way to do it. I mean,
well, it's not easy. It's not easy, but what's the alternative? The alternative is what we're seeing right now. Eddie Higgins of UNICEF telling Kristof about a 7-year-old Lebanese girl who lost 15 members of her family in an Israeli strike a few days ago. She lost her parents and her siblings and suffered, cuts and bruises. All right. So that's the alternative, right? The alternatives are either this or whatever Trump's going to do. Those are the alternatives. Genocide or maybe genocide.
Yeah, well, I certainly hope that Kamala Harris will look at all this humanitarian disaster, all the people killed, all the civilians, all the women and the children, and say, hey, Netanyahu, I can't give you any more money or any more weapons for offensive moves into Gaza. It's just, that's it for you. So you have to pull back and start thinking about a two-state solution. That's what I'm hoping she will do. I don't know that she will, but that's what I would like to see.
Well, let's find out whether she's made any moves in that direction. So Harris was on 60 Minutes, I believe, yesterday. I don't watch that program, but I try to keep up, and I think this was actually, because the news is so TV is so different. Everything comes out in drips and drabs, and we don't know when it's actually technically released. But Brianna Joy Gray retweeted this out in response to a straightforward question about whether America has any influence to prevent Netanyahu's claims. Harris just keeps repeating that America is committing to help Israel defend itself. This is a genocidal ideology that should be resisted. I'm going to play that clip in a second and see what your thoughts are, Arlen. But Brianna Joy Gray is not voting for Kamala Harris. She has said she will not do it. She is not going to. Why do you think there are some people who are presumably, she's a Harvard-educated lawyer. I like to think I'm a pretty smart guy myself. I went to Georgetown, well, not Harvard, but still it's a good school.
Yeah.
Why are there otherwise intelligent people who are knowledgeable, informed, who have made this decision that we simply cannot vote for this kind of people? These kind of people are just simply beyond the pale. They're evil. They're amoral. They have zero humanity in them.
Yeah, I don't blame them. They're making a strong case that Harris would not change things compared to what Joe Biden is doing. But then again, the other side, there's lots of Republicans who are also quitting the Republican Party and going against Trump. And so, it goes both ways, but both parties will do it. We'll have exceptions. But, how many ways can I say it? We only have two choices, Democrat or Republican, in real life, in reality. So,
all right, let's play the clip here. I know it's getting redundant, and I hate being redundant. Let me get rid of that VLC muted. That doesn't look good there. There we go. Just didn't want to have it. Here we go. And it won't be muted either. It shouldn't be muted.
We supply Israel with billions of dollars in military aid. Mm-hmm. And yet Prime Minister Netanyahu seems to be charting his own course. The Biden-Harris administration has pressed him to agree to a ceasefire. He's resisted. You urged him not to go into Lebanon. He went in anyway. He has promised to make Iran pay for the missile attack, and that has the potential of expanding the war. Does the U.S. have no sway over Prime Minister Netanyahu?
The aid that we have given Israel allowed Israel to defend itself against 200 ballistic missiles.
Do you find it frustrating that she completely ignores the question and tries to spin it into some ridiculous, side issue?
Yeah, it bothers me. It definitely does. She's just not willing at this point to break from Biden. And, she figures, well, if I stay with him, I'm not going to offend anybody else. And I still have a chance to win. But yeah, it is frustrating. She knows.
Well, isn't it odd, though, that and you just said that she doesn't want to, we'll play more of this clip, but I was curious because she's unwilling to break from Biden, at least on this issue, perhaps because she agrees with him. And yet what the other article that you brought to my attention says, Arlen, is that people want her to break with Biden, that they don't. The least popular thing she can do is just continue to pursue the same policies that Joe Biden did.
Yeah, she's very cautious right now, and I wish she wasn't as cautious as she is. I'd like to see her have more breaks from Biden. In fact, there is something in one of the stories about that she polls better when she disagrees with Biden about, and has some differences with Biden and kind of gets hurt when she keeps the same policies. So I wonder just how smart her, the people that run her campaign are, because, she needs to kind of be her own person.
Well, there's the quote from that article that you brought to my attention, Arlen. I really appreciate it. Great curating today. Thank you. So from CNN, this is exactly what you said, that the best performing statements by Harris are those that display a clear break between her and Biden. And she has, by the way, broken with Biden, at least when it comes to taxing the rich. She doesn't want to tax them as highly as Biden does. But pretty much on every other issue, at least the ones that I care most about, whether it's fracking, whether it's endless war with Russia, whether it's a war with Iran, she's almost out-Bidening Biden. The building the wall. She's been out-Bidening Biden on those issues.
Yeah, I don't know. She's made the decision, along with her advisors, that she just has to be very cautious and not make any breaks from, what's traditional and what Biden has been doing. And I think it's a mistake, and it could cost her the election. So I hope she, she got less than 30 days. I hope she.
Is she being cautious, or is she just telling us this is who I am? Somebody who doesn't care about genocide, who doesn't care about civilian deaths, who will respond when the billionaire class urges me to do something, I will respond to them, however. Isn't it more plausible to just believe this is who Kamala Harris is?
Well, neither of us could get inside her brain and really know what she believes and what she thinks. And so I'm going to go with what I hope she believes and thinks, and you're going to question that, understandably. So,
I don't want to question it. I honestly, I very sincerely, Arlen, said when she first got when she was first sort of anointed the successor to Biden, I said I would vote for her if she will break with Biden on Israel. If she'll break with Israel, I would vote. I said I would vote for her. I would.
Yeah.
She has done just the opposite. So
Yeah.
it's not that I want to believe or I'm, going to, or I have to believe. It's just based on the evidence that I see. I haven't seen evidence to the contrary.
Well, we have to keep in mind, too, that she has been vice president for the last, three and a half years, whatever. And her job does not allow her to have differences with Biden, which is what bothered me about that vice presidential debate when Vance kept saying, well, it's, Kamala Harris's administration that did this and Kamala Harris's administration did that, which she doesn't have that much clout. She doesn't have the freedom to do what she really wants to do.
Well,
So
then isn't that incumbent on her to say just that? To say just that? I argued vociferously against supplying arms to Israel, and I respect Joe Biden. There are areas where we're on the same page, but this was a terrible thing that he did.
Well, I think if she totally went against Netanyahu and Israel, that she would pay a price politically and, money wise. And she doesn't want to take that chance. She figured she could just go along with the way things are going now, and Trump will look so bad in comparison that she's going to win. But it's way too close. And, I'm not too happy about the way things are going either, but All
right, let's continue with the video. I'm sorry to cut you off there. We look at the time as we've done a lot here, and I know we keep recycling the same basic dispute. We're not getting anywhere with that. It's unfortunate, but the news is news. This is news. This is from yesterday, and the Kristof piece, obviously, in yesterday's paper. So it's relevant. So let's play more of this clip, and I've got some polls I want to share with you, and we'll continue the conversation. Maybe get to a little bit, it's not a feel good story because Pete Rose died, but it's a different direction anyway. So we got a lot more to talk about here on Halitics. If you want to join us, 240-242-5646. Don't forget, that's the phone number. Would love to chat with you. Here's Harris on 60.
The phone number, Al. Where is the phone number?
I took it off because there's no place, but I guess I'll put the oval back for you, Arlen. I can put it in this little field here, the black field there. So there you can see it now. You should be able to. So here's the clip of Harris.
That were just meant to attack the Israelis and the people of Israel. And when we think about the threat that Hamas, Hezbollah presents, Iran, I think that it is without any question our imperative to do what we can to allow Israel to defend itself against those kinds of attacks. Now, the work that we do diplomatically with the leadership of Israel is an ongoing pursuit around making clear our principles, which include the need for humanitarian aid, the need for this war to end, the need for a deal to be done, which would release the hostages and create a ceasefire. And we're not going to stop in terms of putting that pressure on Israel and in the region, including Arab leaders.
But it seems that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not listening.
Well, Bill, the work that we have done has resulted in a number of movements in that region by Israel that were very much prompted by or a result of many things, including our advocacy for what needs to happen in the region.
All right. So she argues that they've had impact on Israel. She presents zero evidence of that. She doesn't cite to any specific behavioral change or modification by Israel. This to me, actually, putting aside Harris, this is political double talk, gobbledygook. This is why Americans are so disgusted with politics. I think this is again a way that if we could, the influencers, if they weren't so embedded in the system, we could move away from this two-party disaster that we have, this metastasizing cancer.
Yeah, she was very evasive and didn't say what I'd like her to say, but at least she did make some movement in saying we need to put pressure on Netanyahu and try to get some kind of a peace deal. I mean, she's willing to at least do that, but I wish she would be stronger. I wish she would be more independent of Biden, but again, she would pay a price politically, and she doesn't want to pay that price.
Well, she's paying a price politically by not breaking with Biden, right? I mean, we've already seen, at least according to the CNN poll, that people want her to break with Biden. They want her to chart her own course. So given that reality, why do you think she's so unwilling to, when it comes at least to the disastrous policy? Clearly, that's putting us on a path towards perhaps, I don't know, I don't know Armageddon, but just ever worsening death, destruction in the Middle East.
Yeah, I feel bad about that. She's just not ready to make a big major break and take the really big chances that could actually hurt her in the polls and lose her money, and she's just not there yet. And I'm hoping that she'll continue, at least one, if she is elected, that she'll at least start thinking about ways to get peace in Gaza, so there's no more civilians being killed, and having their food and water and everything restricted. It's a bad scene totally in Gaza, and I hope that she's...
And Lebanon too now, and not just Gaza, Lebanon as well. Israel's expanded the operation. All right, let me play. Here's a clip from, I mentioned Brianna Joy Gray earlier. Here she's interviewing vice presidential candidate Dr. Butch Ware. He is running mate for Jill Stein.
People in the Muslim community see like even more reason to be jumping on Jill Stein's campaign. So that's the reason for the coordinated attack, because their polling then started to even go worse than that. So Council of American Islamic Relations about 3 weeks ago showed Jill and Kamala running 29%. This is after nationwide. This is right after I come on the ticket. Then less than a week later, we're ahead in Wisconsin and Arizona in polling in the Muslim community. Now, hasn't been released yet. Yaqeen Institute out of Texas, their most recent polling says that 53% of the Muslim community nationwide is going third party, with 80% of that coming to the Green Party. 15% support for Kamala.
I'm going to just stop the clip there for a sec, because I tried to find that poll. I couldn't find it. I don't believe anyone who cites polls until I see the poll itself. But he is correct, obviously, that CARE did find in August that Stein and Harris were virtually tied with 29% of Muslim voters. And that in swing states, it is also true, Michigan, Wisconsin, anyway, I don't know about Pennsylvania, which both have, Michigan's known as a state with a very large, relatively large Muslim population, very large relative Muslim population. Wisconsin has a somewhat sizable Muslim population. I understand so does Georgia, by the way. And all of those states show Stein either tied or ahead of Kamala Harris. So here's my question for you, Arlen. If Trump is even worse, if we have more to fear from Trump, at least in terms of supporting Israel, that he would be even more horrible, and that we have to acknowledge that and therefore vote for Harris, why aren't the Muslims, who are most concerned about what's happening to them, to their sisters and brothers overseas, how come they're willing to now embrace a third-party candidate and risk electing Trump, according to you, anyway?
I wouldn't blame them. If I were a Muslim, I would also probably, move toward Jill Stein, because, they have much more at stake. They have people that they know that maybe have been killed in that area. And, but the Muslim votership is not a huge number. And there's probably a lot more Jewish people, and certainly a lot more Jewish money, that Kamala would be in danger of losing. So she's not going to take that chance. But I certainly understand why, a third-party candidate would be better if you were a Muslim in this country.
But you've made the case that, in fact, voting third party is a mistake because it would help Trump, right?
It would.
So wouldn't the Muslims make exactly the same calculation as you? Your argument is that Trump would be even worse. We would see even a worse outcome in the Middle East than we're seeing now. I guess I'm asking, why do you think these Muslim voters, you can't put yourself in their head, but I mean, what do you think is going through their minds? If they're making the same calculus you are, shouldn't they say, well, as bad as Harris is, we have to vote for her because Trump would be worse for our people?
Well, for their people, that's the number one issue. That is so much stronger than any other issue. So,
but you're saying for their people, Trump would be worse than Harris.
Yes. I don't think I'm going to convince any Muslims in any of those states to change their mind. But
so you think they're wrong when they believe that it doesn't really matter whether they vote for Harris or Trump?
If it helps Trump, then I think they're hurting themselves and hurting the country. And yeah, that's the way I would look at it.
Okay. I mean, it's true. We often, like I've been accused of being privileged, and that's why I'm willing to vote for Jill Stein. And if I were black, then I would be more reasonably afraid of Trump. But of course, we've seen many African-American voters who support Trump. So we can't, but I do think it's interesting and instructive that a third-party candidate, in this case, Jill Stein, has really managed to capture a sizable percentage, at least according to this poll. A very significant number of Muslim voters are voting for her, and that's virtually unheard of. And I think it really does bespeak a recognition that the Democratic Party's policies are awful, devastating, and not any better for Muslims than the Republican is. But you disagree with that, which is fine.
Well, I mean, you're saying that the Muslim community is an important voting bloc, and at this point, I don't think they are. I don't think they're going to make any big difference.
Well, they could make a difference, but that's not what my argument. They could. I mean, it definitely in Michigan could easily be the difference, given how close the race has been in the recent elections between the Republican and the Democrat, and likewise Wisconsin, likewise Georgia, for example. But that's not exactly what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the movement by Muslims away from the Democratic Party instructs us that the Democratic Party is a bad party, that the people who run the Democratic Party are bad people, that these are genocidal maniacs, or if not genocidal maniacs, they're amoral genociders. Either way, doesn't really matter. The practical import of Democratic Party policies is horrific, is war crimes, is making us complicit in a genocide. That's my argument.
Well, I think, Kamala Harris is not saying she 100% endorses what Biden is doing. We don't, like I say, she's been vice president. She can't really make a break from Biden. It's just not what vice presidents do. So ideally, if she gets elected, she'll look at the whole situation, total situation, realize that, all these civilians, all the women and children are being killed and all the other horrible things going on there, and make a break from Biden. That's my hope. And, if we have Trump elected president, I wouldn't have that kind of hope.
Arlen, what kind of cognitive dissonance do you get when you come on my program? Because I posted on your Facebook page and I got immediately attacked because I'm critical of the Harris-Biden pro-proxy war with Ukraine. And I think you can correct me if I'm wrong. If I don't think I misbehaved, but if I did, let me know. I don't want to cause trouble on your page. But most people, I think, certainly the people that, read a lot of what you write, agree with you. And I'm just curious on most of these issues. And I'm just curious, especially maybe I think they agree with you on pretty much all of it, but they especially would agree with you on the importance of reelecting Harris from vice president to president. So how does it feel are you what is the matter with this guy? Doesn't he get it? Or, how do you react to this?
Yeah, I think you're just unrealistic. You're not really looking at the entire picture of what's going to happen and what's likely to happen. Jill Stein's not going to be there. It's only going to be down to those two, Harris and Trump. And given those choices, you got to go with Harris.
But here's where we disagree. I don't view there much difference. I agree with you that there's almost no chance that Jill Stein will win. I lament that. I wish it were different. I argue with you about why you should support her so we together can build a movement that makes it possible to elect a good person to be president. But where I think you and I really break is that I don't agree with you that Harris would be better than Trump or would be significantly better, or there's a real qualitative difference. And I've made the point, I think on some issues, Trump is better. And even if Trump is worse, I don't think he's that much worse. And I think it's essential that we break away from the system. And defeating the Democrats is the only way I think we can break away from this system.
I think Trump is way different than any other president we've ever had, any other person we've had in politics, really, because he's just not able to give up on anything, and he's he'll say and do whatever he wants. And I think if he loses the election, he's going to say that he won, and he's so predictable. And so democracy, I think, is very much in danger were he to become president, because all the that Project 2025, if even some of that gets enacted, I think we're going to be in very bad shape, and he's going to come, and he's going to also Trump's going to go after the people he thinks are his enemies. He'll go after all the Bidens. He'll go after the journalists that he doesn't like, and it's going to get very ugly. It's already ugly, and it's going to get uglier.
Trump's a bad guy, no question about it. Don't vote for him. That's my advice. Don't vote for Trump. He's a bad guy. We can do better, just not by voting for the Democrat. You're watching Halitics. We've got a few more minutes left. It's always great to talk to Arlen. He's so gracious to come on the program and put up with me. So I appreciate that. Phone number is 240-242-5646. You wanted to talk about this story, from the hit leader or from the thought leader, Arlen. You can see it's right. It says it on your green little name tag that I put together. From thought leader to hit leader, Pete Rose. Why did the death of Pete Rose, by the way, of natural causes, apparently, he didn't overdose. I mean, I know he took a lot of painkillers and there's a lot of issues, but he was in his 80s. He had his fourscore. How many years do you get? 70 years and 10. Score is 20 or 14 years. It's not. A score is 14. So he got his full
20,
measure.
I think it's 20.
Score. I think 4 years.
7 years ago. So that'd be 87 years ago.
I guess you're right. So it's score. He got his, you're right, exactly right. A score would be, 14 is a stone. If you weigh 10 stone, you weigh 140 pounds. So Arlen, what is it about Pete Rose's life and death that you want to really comment about?
Well, from the very beginning, I always thought he should be in the Hall of Fame, because the Hall of Fame is for people who did, great things in baseball. And there's no question that Pete Rose did great things in baseball. He was the all-time hit leader. He made a big difference in the game. And I just don't think that his personal problems, whatever, should be the influence that would keep him out of the Hall of Fame. I mean, there's everybody else is in the Hall of Fame for what they've done in baseball, and some of them, their characters aren't that great, but they're still allowed in. Why is Pete Rose the one that's the exception? And he isn't allowed to get into the Hall of Fame, which is where I think he belongs.
So I don't necessarily disagree with your conclusion. I'm kind of on the fence of this. I'm going to kind of play devil's advocate a little bit, but it's not like my views on Harris versus yours, where we really do defer. I hear what you're saying, Arlen. I think the strongest argument would be if he did bet on baseball, and the conclusion is he absolutely did while he was managing, then there's a huge conflict, right? I mean, his if you're a fan of the Cincinnati Reds, you go out. If you're a player on the Cincinnati Reds, if you're a baseball fan, the game's integrity rests on both teams trying their hardest to win, not on one team or one team's manager making decisions that negatively impact on his team's ability to win. And that is really perhaps put at risk. Even if he didn't bet against the Reds, there's a chance he owes gamblers money. They leverage that. I think that is a scary proposition if you're a baseball fan.
Well, as far as I know, he did not bet against himself or his team, and I think that counts for something. And and obviously what I found out from that article too is he had a lot of personal problems. He had problems with drugs, with women, with gambling. He was a gambling addict, and people knew that, and they weren't able. They didn't help him. They didn't try to help him. They just allowed him to keep on doing what he's doing, and in the end, it cost him as far as his spot in the Hall of Fame. So it's just a tragic story all the way around.
It's very unfortunate. I agree with you there. I mean, this is not somebody of great character by any means, but certainly a great baseball player, and that's who the Hall of Fame is supposed to honor. But character is also relevant. And again, I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you. I'm just trying to point both sides of it. Obviously, his statistics are such that he should have been absent some very significant character issue that redounded, harmed the game, should be in the Hall of Fame. You mentioned that he is the only one, but baseball has made, kept other great players out. Shoeless Joe Jackson statistics were such that he would have been elected easily if he hadn't been found to have bet against the White Sox in the Black Sox scandal of 1919. And we know that some of the players with the greatest statistics ever, including both Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens, will not be elected, at least not during their lifetimes, unless something changes because of their use of steroids. So do you think those are different, or from the Rose situation, or do you think they should also be elected?
Well, I think that Shoeless Joe Jackson obviously should, not be allowed in the Hall of Fame because he bet against himself, against his team, and he got punished for it. And like I say, as far as I know, Rose would never bet against his own team. So I think that makes a big difference.
Or on his team either. And I think that's relevant too, because if he had bet on his team, yes, he would be maximizing his, presumably, but you might engage in short-term strategies that are going to hurt your team down the road. For example, leaving a starting pitcher out when he's thrown over his allotted number of pitches, or, that's the best example I can come up with. I'm sure there are many others where a manager might engage in a short-term strategy to win a game that might hurt their team in the long run. And I understand he did not bet on the Reds to win or lose. And I agree with you. That's very relevant, Arlen.
And, I can't help but think about somebody like Ty Cobb. I mean, he was maybe the greatest baseball player of all time, but everybody agrees his character was not good at all. He was a flawed person, but nobody ever said, hey, we got to keep him out of the Hall of Fame. Ty Cobb shouldn't be there because, he was just too good. And they're going strictly by what he did in baseball, not by, the kind of personality that he had.
Well, I don't love the Cobb analysis for several reasons. One, if you look at Cobb's record, when it comes to, he's been called a racist, he's been called a thug, and there certainly were situations where he did apparently go into the stands and beat people up. But there's another side of it, which was really kind of discounted. He advocated for integration. People don't know that, but he believed he spoke against the color line. He was a supporter of Willie Mays and said he was the greatest player in the game. And so I think this Cobb situation is a little more complex than he maybe presented. That said, he should, of course, be in the Hall of Fame, even if he was a thug and a gangster or whatever. If he's not, compromising the game itself, then if you're as you said, one of the all-time greats. You should be in the Hall of Fame, but his situation is slightly different from Rose. I don't say Rose shouldn't be in. I hear what you're saying, and maybe there shouldn't be a character clause, but Pete Rose was in a lot of ways, and this probably shouldn't be relevant either. This is sort of my last point, then I'll let you finish up. But as long as you like, Arlen, he was kind of his own worst enemy in a lot of ways. And as you said, a guy who has serious pathology, gambling, an addictive personality, and simply was unwilling to have any kind of real self-analysis or self-awareness, and it hurt him. I'm sorry he's not in the Hall of Fame. I'm not as upset about it as you are.
Well, I may have to change my mind about the whole thing too, because Donald Trump is in favor of Rose being in the Hall of Fame. So I don't want to be on the same side as Donald Trump. So maybe I'll have to rethink my position. But
that seems a little around. I know I was going to give you the last word, Arlen, but I got to say that seems a little crazy. Yeah. I mean, if you want Rose in, you want him in. What do you care about what Trump says?
I know, but I think, I would like to have seen Pete Rose have the satisfaction of knowing that he was worthy of the Hall of Fame. And by the way, I didn't know those things about Ty Cobb. It's interesting to know that he had some good points about his personality and his ideas. So I'll have to rethink my position about Ty Cobb.
Well, I mean, I may be wrong. I'm just repeating some of the things I've read, and there may be more stories to it than that. But Cobb's a very interesting person, and I had read that he gave money to hospitals in Georgia that served poor Georgians, including African American Georgians. So he didn't only give to. I mean, it was segregated when he was born in Georgia. It was very segregated, but he was not the monster. As far as I can tell, there were some pretty positive things that he did. So not the monster that some have portrayed him. Very interesting about Pete Rose. Do you feel, and I know I said I gave you the last word, and I will. So I want to follow up with a question. Do you feel like it would have been better, and I think I know the answer, but I want you to expound on it, to have elected Pete Rose while he was alive? Or do you think it makes sense, okay, he did some things, he was kind of a low life, so maybe he doesn't get to enjoy it while alive, but now that he's dead, there's no harm in putting him in the hall?
Well, certainly he should have gotten in when he was alive and could enjoy, the ability to go into the Hall of Fame and say, hey, that's me, I certainly earned my spot. And I'm sorry he didn't have that satisfaction, but, as we know, he wasn't that great of a human being either. So, it's just the way it turned out. And I will have to look at Ty Cobb some more, because, boy, you're telling me things I did not know.
All right, last point, and again, I promise you the last word, but I want to get this in. It supports your argument, really. My understanding is that most players and most retired players, or virtually all of them, believe Rose should be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, it would seem to me that it was the commissioner at the time, with Giamatti or whatever, that was most stubborn about it. But then again, other commissioners have been in there and did not give Rose the opportunity. So,
Yeah, I mean, I could talk about this for a while. Let me ask you, then, let me continue. Where do you stand on I don't know if it's ensconced anywhere, but the apparent ban on steroid users?
Yeah, that's very tricky, and I really haven't looked into that so much. But that certainly does complicate things. And do these people who broke records with steroids really deserve to earn those records? I don't know. I don't have a good answer. Haven't made up my mind on that.
Arlen, thanks so much for joining me. Great stories that you brought to our attention. I really appreciate that. Appreciate your coming on board every week and presenting a very different perspective on some issues. I mean, I think we both have the same goals, but different thoughts on how to achieve them. So we'll see you next Monday, unless you got anything else you want to throw out there. And
I think we're good.
All right, that'll do it. And tomorrow, more Halitics. And I've got a guest coming on. It's Vernon Bohr. We're going to be at 2 p.m. Eastern tomorrow because Vernon, like Arlen, when he's on the West Coast, doesn't like to get up early.